Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Seaman Grace McCarter. We warmly welcome the family of Private John Nicholas Crowley, whose story will be told shortly. 83 years ago today, on the 19th of February 1942, Japanese aircraft attacked Darwin. The raiders began to arrive just before 10 a.m. Air raid sirens were sounded as Japanese bombers conducted attacks on the ships in Darwin Harbour, most of which were anchored near each other, making them an easy target for air attack. The first wave of the attack lasted for 30 minutes, resulting in the sinking of 3 warships, 6 merchant vessels, and damage to another 10 ships. The second wave of the attack arrived just before midday, resulting in many Allied aircraft also being destroyed or damaged. Over 260 Japanese aircraft were involved in the raids. This was the first time that mainland Australia had come under foreign attack since white settlement. The raid claimed about 250 to 300 casualties. Between 300 and 400 people were wounded. With Singapore having fallen only days earlier, Darwin's population panicked and began to stream southwards, heading for Adelaide River and the train south. Attacks on Darwin continued during March and April. Through remembering these painful events and the sacrifices made by individuals, we remain mindful of our history, but not held hostage to it. We emerged from these events forever changed, with a greater belief in ourselves and a deeper understanding of what it means to be Australian. Today, we remember the anniversary of the bombing of Darwin and pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening we are honoured to acknowledge Rear Admiral Toshiyuki Hirata, Director General Operations and Plans Department, Maritime Staff Office, Japan. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Clubs Association, and we welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of Hume Anglican Grammar Calcallo campus visiting from Calcallo, Victoria. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier.
Honey, slow!
Now, if you're able, I invite you to all please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, 8 Catapult party, present! Arms!
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder! Arms! Catapult party, order! Arms!
Students, please be seated, and anyone else who chooses to do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private John Nicholas Crowley. John Crowley was born in 1866 near Wollongong, New South Wales. He was the second eldest of 10 children, born to Michael Joseph Crowley, a publican, and his wife, Bridget. John grew up around Temora, where he trained as a mechanic during the early days of the gold rush. In December 1893, he married Elizabeth Lloyd Roberts. They had 8 children, 3 of whom did not survive infancy. The Crowley family later moved to West Wyalong. John was known as a keen sportsman and a champion rifle shot, and served as Justice of the Peace and coroner for a time. In 1910, his wife Elizabeth passed away. When the First World War broke out in 1914, John was working as a journalist and was the proprietor for the Wyalong Star newspaper. When John Crowley enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in November 1916, his brother and 3 of his sons had already joined. He was assigned to the 6th Reinforcements of the 34th Battalion. On the 25th of November 1916, he boarded the troop ship Beltana and embarked for active service from Sydney. At the end of January 1917, he disembarked in England. He continued training at Sutton Veny alongside his son Reginald, who had recently been transferred to the 34th Battalion. In July, Crowley and his son began their journey to the Western Front. They joined the unit in the trenches of Belgium at the end of the month, just after the attack on Messines Ridge. Over the next months, Crowley alternated between periods of duty in the front lines and training in the rear areas, as fighting along the Ypres salient continued. His son Reginald contracted trench fever and was evacuated to England for treatment. On the 12th of October 1917, Crowley took part in an attack on Passchendaele. Their objective was high upon a ridge. Despite days of heavy rain, the battle went ahead in the early hours under appalling, muddy conditions. The troops eventually got into the village and onto the desired ridge, but were forced to retire almost to their starting point. By the time the attacking force had withdrawn, the 34th Battalion alone had suffered a casualty rate of over 50%. Among the missing was Private John Crowley. His fate was not certain until March 1918, when a court of inquiry determined that he had been killed in action at Passchendaele in October 1917. One of his comrades told the Red Cross, "Crowley was advancing about 20 yards ahead of me at Passchendaele, just on this side of the ridge, when he was hit. He was just breathing his last when I got up to him, a matter of less than 5 minutes. He did not speak and was not conscious. He was nearly cut in two. Crowley's comrades were forced to leave him in a shell hole where he died of his wounds. His remains were later retrieved from the battlefield and interned at Tynecott Cemetery in Belgium. In 1918, the Wyalong Advocate reported Crowley's death and noted, "His best friend would not have us say that he was universally popular, the possessor of a strong mind and the wielder of a fearless and sometimes reckless pen. He aroused many personal antagonisms. But, transcending all his peculiarities, John Crowley was a patriot of the first water. We know of none greater." Private John Crowley was 52 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private John Nicholas Crowley, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Catapult, party, shoulder, arms.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult, party, present, arms. Catapult, party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult, party, in words, turn. Catapult, party, quick, arch.
We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, the staff and the volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. Wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.